The Gunsmith's Gamble by Clara Winslow. The rifle barrel gleamed like quicksilver in the lamplight as Katherine Whitmore examined the intricate engravings along its stock. Her fingers, stained with ink from the morning's correspondence, traced the delicate scrollwork with the reverence of someone who understood craftsmanship. The weapon was beautiful, deadly perhaps, but undeniably beautiful. "Mr. Garrett certainly knows his trade," she murmured to herself, setting the rifle carefully back in its display case. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see the gunsmith himself entering his shop, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe. Samuel Garrett paused when he saw her, his weathered hand still gripping the door handle. At 32, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned to trust his instincts above all else. His dark hair was streaked with premature silver at the temples, and his green eyes held the kind of wariness that came from years of living on the edge of civilization. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of a man who spoke only when necessary, "I wasn't expecting you today." Katherine smoothed her navy traveling dress, acutely aware of how out of place she must look among the gun oil and leather. She had arrived in Copper Ridge 3 days ago, sent by her father's law firm in Boston to settle the estate of her late uncle. The small Colorado mining town was as different from her refined world as night from day. "I wanted to thank you personally for the information about Uncle Theodore's collection," she said, gesturing toward the rifles displayed along the walls. "I had no idea he was such an enthusiast." Samuel moved behind the counter, his movements economical and precise. Theodore was more than an enthusiast. He was a collector of rare pieces and a fair hand with a rifle himself. These aren't just weapons, they're works of art. The way he spoke of her uncle's possessions surprised her. In Boston, Katherine had grown accustomed to men who measured worth in dollars and social standing. Samuel Garrett spoke of beauty and craftsmanship with the passion of a true artisan. "You seem to understand their value better than I do," she admitted. "Perhaps you could help me determine which pieces should be preserved and which might be sold." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps or approval. "You're not planning to sell the entire collection?" "I'm not certain what I'm planning," Katherine said honestly. "This whole situation is rather overwhelming. I barely knew my uncle, and now I find myself responsible for his house, his business interests, and apparently his impressive collection of firearms." Samuel studied her for a long moment. "If you don't mind my asking, what did you know about Theodore?" Katherine wandered to the window, watching the dusty main street of Copper Ridge. A stagecoach rattled past, kicking up clouds of dirt that settled on everything like a fine brown powder. "Very little, I'm afraid. He was my father's younger brother, but they quarreled years ago over some business matter. Theodore came west, and we lost touch completely." "He was a good man," Samuel said quietly. "Honest in his dealings, fair to his workers. The Silver Bell mine employed half this town." "The mine," Katherine repeated, turning back to face him. "I understand it's been struggling recently." "Gold's been getting harder to find. Theodore was looking into new methods, bringing in equipment from back east. He had plans," Samuel trailed off, shaking his head. "I suppose that's neither here nor there now." Katherine found herself drawn to the sadness in his voice. "You were friends?" "As much as Theodore allowed anyone to be his friend. He was a private man, but he had a good mind for business and a better one for people. This town will miss him." The bell chimed again, and a young woman entered, her calico dress practical but well made. She had the kind of natural beauty that needed no artifice. Auburn hair tucked neatly under a simple bonnet, warm brown eyes, and a genuine smile. "Sam, I brought those leather strips you ordered," she said. Then noticed Katherine. "Oh, forgive me. I didn't realize you had a customer." "Margaret Sullivan, meet Katherine Whitmore," Samuel said. "She's Theodore's niece from Boston." Margaret's expression immediately softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your uncle was a wonderful man. He helped my family through some difficult times." Katherine found herself genuinely touched by the warmth in the other woman's voice. "Thank you. I'm learning that he was much more important to this community than I realized." "Important doesn't begin to cover it," Margaret said earnestly. "When my father was injured in the mine collapse 2 years ago, Mr. Whitmore made sure we had food on the table and a roof over our heads. He never expected anything in return." Samuel cleared his throat. "Margaret runs the general store with her family. She's also the finest seamstress in 3 counties." Margaret blushed prettily. "Sam exaggerates, but I do try to help folks with their mending and such." Katherine noticed the easy familiarity between them. the way Margaret's eyes lingered on Samuel's face. It was clear the young woman harbored tender feelings for the gunsmith. The realization brought an unexpected pang of something Katherine couldn't quite identify. "I should let you get back to business," Katherine said, moving toward the door. "Mr. Garrett, would you be willing to come to the house tomorrow? I'd like to go through Uncle Theodore's collection properly." "Of course. Would 10 o'clock suit you?" "Perfect. Good day, Miss Sullivan." As Katherine walked back to her uncle's house, she found herself thinking not about the daunting task of settling the estate, but about the unexpected depth she'd glimpsed in Samuel Garrett's character. In Boston, she was surrounded by men who spoke eloquently about art and literature, but had never created anything beautiful with their own hands. Samuel's callous fingers could coax intricate patterns from cold metal, and his quiet respect for her uncle's memory spoke of a loyalty that was increasingly rare in her world. The house itself was a revelation. From the outside, it appeared to be a typical frontier dwelling, sturdy but unremarkable. Inside, however, Theodore had created a gentleman's retreat. The walls were lined with books, the furniture was well-made if not fashionable, and everywhere Katherine looked, she saw evidence of a refined sensibility. Her uncle's study was particularly impressive. A massive oak desk dominated the room, its surface covered with maps, mining reports, and correspondence. Katherine had spent the better part of 2 days sorting through papers, trying to understand the scope of Theodore's business interests. The Silver Bell mine was indeed struggling, but Theodore had been working on a solution. His correspondence with equipment manufacturers in Denver suggested he was close to implementing new extraction methods that could revive the operation. More intriguingly, his personal letters revealed a man who cared deeply about his workers and the community he'd helped build. One letter, in particular, caught her attention. It was addressed to a mining engineer in San Francisco, discussing the possibility of bringing in new investors to fund the mine's modernization. The letter was dated just 2 weeks before Theodore's death. Katherine was still puzzling over the implications when Miss Henderson, the housekeeper, knocked on the study door. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Garrett is here to see you." Katherine looked up, surprised to see that the morning had passed so quickly. "Please show him in, Mrs. Henderson." Samuel entered the study, his hat in his hands. He seemed larger in the confines of the book-lined room, but no less self-possessed. His gaze swept over the organized chaos of papers on the desk. "Making sense of Theodore's affairs?" he asked. "Trying to," Katherine admitted. "He was involved in far more than I realized. The mine, of course, but also investments in the railroad, partnerships with merchants in Denver, even some speculation in California real estate." Samuel nodded. Theodore always said a smart man didn't put all his eggs in one basket. The mine was his main concern, but he had other interests. "Did you know he was trying to find new investors for the mine?" Samuel's expression grew cautious. "He mentioned it. Why?" Katherine showed him the letter to the San Francisco engineer. This suggests he was much closer to a solution than anyone realized. If he could have brought in the right equipment, the mine might have been saved. "Might have been," Samuel agreed. "But Theodore's dead, and without his knowledge of the operation, most investors would consider it too risky." "What if someone else had that knowledge?" Samuel set down his hat and moved closer to the desk. "What are you thinking?" Katherine felt her pulse quicken at his proximity. He smelled of leather and wood smoke, thoroughly masculine scents that were entirely foreign to her Boston experience. "I'm thinking that perhaps I shouldn't be so quick to sell everything and return east." "You're considering staying in Copper Ridge?" The incredulity in his voice was unmistakable. Katherine straightened, feeling a familiar spark of determination. "Why not? I have a good head for business, Mr. Garrett. I've been managing my father's household accounts since I was 16, and I've helped with correspondence for his law practice. I'm not some helpless society lady who can't function without servants." Samuel studied her with those penetrating green eyes. Running a mine is different from managing household accounts. "Perhaps. But I wouldn't be running it alone. Theodore had good people working for him, and I'd be wise enough to rely on their expertise." "And your life in Boston? Your family?" Katherine moved to the window, looking out over the town her uncle had helped build. "My life in Boston consists of charitable committees and social obligations. My family," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "My father is a good man, but he sees me as a burden to be married off to the right sort of gentleman. He's already made it clear that he expects me to return with Theodore's affairs settled and be prepared to accept Mr. Pemberton's suit. Mr. Pemberton? A business associate of my father's. Twice widowed, 20 years my senior, and about as interesting as week-old bread. Katherine turned back to face Samuel. I'm 25 years old, Mr. Garrett. If I don't make my own choices soon, I may never have the chance. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. What would you want from me? Your honest assessment of the mind's potential. And she hesitated, then forged ahead. Your help in understanding how things work here. I may have a head for business, but I know nothing about mining or the way things are done in Colorado. You'd be taking a considerable risk. Yes, Katherine said simply, but perhaps some things are worth the risk. Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a warming that made Katherine's breath catch. All right, he said. Let's look at those guns. The next hour passed in a blur of expert explanations and gentle instruction. Samuel handled each weapon with reverence, explaining its history, its craftsmanship, its value. Katherine found herself more interested in watching his hands than in the weapons themselves. His fingers were long and skilled, scarred from years of working with metal and wood, but infinitely gentle when handling something precious. This one, he said, lifting a beautifully engraved Colt revolver, Theodore commissioned from a gunsmith in Denver. See the silver inlay work? It's not just decorative, it's a map of the Silver Bell mine as it existed when he first bought it. Katherine leaned closer to examine the intricate design. It's beautiful and personal. Theodore was sentimental about the mine. He used to say it was the first thing he'd ever owned that was truly his. What about this one? Katherine reached for a rifle with an unusually ornate stock. Samuel caught her hand before she could touch it. Careful. That one's loaded. The contact sent a shock through Katherine's system. Samuel's hand was warm and calloused, completely engulfing her smaller one. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Samuel seemed to realize what he was doing and released her hand quickly. Sorry, he said, his voice rougher than before. I should have warned you. It's all right, Katherine managed, though her pulse was racing. I should have asked before touching anything. Samuel carefully unloaded the rifle, his movements precise despite what seemed like a slight tremor in his hands. Theodore always kept one loaded. Old habits from his early days out here. It must have been dangerous, those early days. Dangerous enough. This territory was still pretty wild when Theodore first arrived. Indian troubles, claimed jumpers, men who thought they could take what they wanted by force. Samuel set the rifle aside and looked at her directly. It's still not an easy place for a woman alone. I wouldn't be alone, Katherine said quietly. There are good people here. People like you. Samuel's eyes held hers for a long moment. Katherine. The sound of her name on his lips sent warmth spiraling through her. Yes? You should know that staying here, trying to run the mine, it wouldn't just be about business. This is a small town. People would talk. About what? About a refined lady from Boston choosing to stay in a rough mining town. About who she spends her time with. About whether she's really suited to this kind of life. Katherine felt a flush of anger. And are you concerned about what people might say about you being seen with me? I'm concerned about what it might mean for you. Samuel's voice was steady, but his eyes were intense. I'm not a gentleman, Katherine. I'm a tradesman who works with his hands. I've never worn a suit that cost more than most men make in a month. And I've never attended a social gathering where knowing which fork to use mattered. Do you think those things matter to me? They should. You're accustomed to a certain kind of life, a certain kind of man. Someone like that Pemberton fellow your father has picked out. Katherine stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Mr. Pemberton has soft hands and speaks beautifully about things he's never experienced. He's never created anything, never built anything, never risked anything. He's never looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. Samuel's breathing had become slightly uneven. Katherine, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I understand that you're nothing like any man I've ever known. I understand that you're honorable and skilled and kind. And I understand that for the first time in my life, I'm not thinking about what's proper or expected or safe. Samuel caught her hand again, but this time he didn't let go. If you stay here, if you try to run the mine, there will be men who'll try to take advantage of you. Men who'll think a woman alone is easy prey. Then I'll need someone I can trust to help me. Someone who knows this country and these people. Katherine, Samuel's voice was rough with emotion. I'm not the kind of man who can give you the life you deserve. What kind of life is that? A life with someone who can take care of you properly. Someone who can give you nice things, social position, security. Katherine smiled, feeling more certain than she had in years. I can take care of myself, Mr. Garrett. I don't need nice things or social position. And as for security, she stepped even closer, until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I've never felt safer than I do right now. Samuel's control finally snapped. His free hand came up to cup her face, and he looked at her with such intensity that Katherine felt her knees go weak. You're sure about this? About staying, about the mine, about you? Katherine finished softly. I've never been more sure of anything. Samuel's thumb traced her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. I'm not good with words, Katherine. I don't know how to speak pretty to a lady. Then don't speak, Katherine whispered. When Samuel kissed her, it was with the same reverence he'd shown for her uncle's guns, as if she were something precious and fragile that deserved to be treasured. But there was nothing fragile about Katherine's response. She kissed him back with all the passion she'd been holding in check for 25 years, all the longing for something real and honest and true. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Samuel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. This changes everything, he said quietly. Yes, Katherine agreed. It does. Over the following weeks, Katherine threw herself into learning everything she could about the mine and the town. She met with Theodore's foreman, studied the geological reports, and corresponded with the engineer in San Francisco. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that the mine could be saved. Samuel was her constant companion and advisor. He introduced her to the key people in town, helped her understand the local customs, and gradually opened up about his own history. She learned that he'd come west after the war, carrying wounds both physical and emotional that had taken years to heal. He'd found peace in the precision of his craft and the quiet respect of his neighbors. I've never wanted more than what I have, he told her one evening as they walked through the town. A successful business, a place where I'm valued, a chance to build something lasting. And now? Katherine asked. Samuel stopped walking and turned to face her. Now I find myself wanting things I never dared to hope for. Their courtship, if it could be called that, was conducted under the watchful eyes of the entire town. Katherine quickly learned that privacy was a luxury that didn't exist in Copper Ridge. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment they spent together was noted and discussed. Margaret Sullivan remained unfailingly polite, but Katherine could see the hurt in her eyes. The young woman had clearly hoped that Samuel would eventually notice her feelings. Katherine felt genuine sympathy for her, but she couldn't regret the path her own life had taken. The real test came when Katherine announced her intention to reopen the Silver Bell mine. The town meeting was packed, with miners, merchants, and their families all crowding into the schoolhouse to hear what Theodore's niece had to say. Katherine stood at the front of the room, acutely aware that her fate and the fate of the town hung in the balance. She dressed carefully for the occasion, choosing a practical dark blue dress that was elegant without being ostentatious. Samuel sat in the front row, his presence giving her courage. I know you're all wondering what I plan to do with my uncle's property, she began, her voice clear and steady. I've spent the past month learning about the mine, the town, and the people who call this place home. I've come to understand that the Silver Bell isn't just a business, it's the lifeblood of this community. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The mine has been struggling, but I believe it can be saved. I've been in contact with engineers and equipment manufacturers who assure me that with the right investment, the Silver Bell can be profitable again. I'm prepared to make that investment. What kind of investment? Called out Jake Morrison, one of the miners. New equipment, including steam-powered extraction systems that will allow us to reach deeper veins of ore. Better safety measures, improved working conditions, and fair wages for all workers. The crowd began to buzz with excitement, but Katherine held up her hand for silence. There's one condition, she continued. I'm not just investing money, I'm investing my life. I'm staying in Copper Ridge permanently. This community will be my home, and your success will be my success. The applause that followed was thunderous. Katherine felt tears in her eyes as she saw the hope and gratitude on the faces around her. These people had been living with uncertainty for too long, and she was offering them a chance at a secure future. After the meeting, Samuel walked her home through the cool evening air. They were both quiet, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "No going back now," Samuel said as they reached her front porch. "No," Katherine agreed, "but I don't want to go back." Samuel took her hands in his. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said before tonight." Katherine felt a flicker of concern at his serious tone. "What is it?" "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you from the moment you walked into my shop and started asking intelligent questions about Theodore's guns. I've loved watching you discover who you really are, away from all the expectations and restrictions of your old life. I love your courage, your determination, your willingness to take risks for what you believe in." Katherine's heart swelled with joy. "I love you too, Samuel. I love your quiet strength, your integrity, your gentle hands that can create beautiful things. I love the way you see the best in people, the way you've made me feel like I belong here." Samuel cupped her face in his hands. "Then marry me, Katherine. Help me build something lasting, something that will outlive both of us." "Yes," Katherine whispered, reaching up to kiss him. "Yes to all of it." Their wedding took place 3 months later, in the small church at the center of town. Katherine wore a dress of ivory silk that Margaret Sullivan had sewn for her, a gesture of friendship that had touched Katherine deeply. The entire town turned out for the celebration, and even Katherine's father had made the journey from Boston, grudgingly admitting that his daughter had found something in Colorado that she never could have found in proper society. The Silver Bell mine reopened 6 months after the wedding, with new equipment and renewed hope. Katherine proved to be as capable a businesswoman as she'd claimed, and under her guidance, the mine began to prosper once again. Samuel continued to run his gunsmith shop, but he also became Katherine's trusted advisor in all business matters. Years later, when visitors asked Katherine if she ever regretted leaving Boston for the rough frontier town, she would smile and gesture toward the thriving community that surrounded her. The Silver Bell mine had become one of the most successful operations in Colorado, providing jobs and prosperity for hundreds of families. The town had grown and modernized, but it had retained the sense of community and mutual support that had first drawn Katherine to it. But more than that, she had found a love that was deeper and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined in her old life. Samuel had taught her that true partnership meant supporting each other's dreams while building something greater together. They had created not just a successful business, but a legacy of fairness and integrity that would influence the town for generations to come. On quiet evenings, Katherine would sometimes sit in her uncle's study, now converted into the mine office, and reflect on the choices that had brought her to this place. She thought about the woman she had been, refined, proper, and ultimately empty, and the woman she had become, strong, capable, and deeply loved. The rifle with the silver inlay map of the mine hung on the wall beside her desk, a reminder of Theodore's faith in the Silver Bell's potential. But it was also a reminder of the moment she had first looked into Samuel's eyes and seen not just a man, but a future worth fighting for. Katherine had gambled everything on a rough frontier town and a quiet gunsmith, and she had won more than she had ever dared to hope for. She had found not just love, but a purpose that would sustain her for the rest of her days. The gamble had paid off, and the rewards would last a lifetime.